They called it the most expensive weapon in history, a $1 trillion disaster, a jet that couldn't fly in the rain. Then on March 4, 2026, an Israeli F-35 shot down an Iranian fighter over Tehran, the first air-to-air kill for the F-35 ever. $1.4 trillion. That number gets thrown around so often it loses meaning. So consider this. That's enough to fund NASA for 70 years. Enough to build 140 aircraft carriers, spent on a single aircraft program that for the first decade of its existence couldn't break the sound barrier without damaging itself. And yet, on a Tuesday morning in March 2026, a pilot inside an F-35I Adir pulled the trigger. An Iranian Yak-130 fell from the sky. And 25 years of criticism, scandal, and billion-dollar overruns collapsed into a single, undeniable fact. The F-35 works. This is the complete evolution of the most controversial, most expensive, and now most combat-proven stealth fighter ever built. From a Pentagon competition nobody expected to survive, through 2 decades of failure and reinvention, to the moment it wrote itself into history. But to understand why March 4, 2026 matters, you first have to understand how close this aircraft came to never existing at all. The year is 1993. The Cold War is over, the Soviet Union is gone, and the United States Air Force is staring at a problem it doesn't know how to solve. It has 3 separate fighter programs, 3 separate aircraft, 3 separate supply chains, training pipelines, and maintenance systems. The F-16 for the Air Force, the F/A-18 for the Navy, the AV-8B Harrier for the Marines. Each one optimized for a different mission, each one burning a different kind of money. The Pentagon called it unsustainable. A defense analyst at RAND called it the most expensive redundancy in the history of American air power. And somewhere inside the Department of Defense, a single question was forming. What if one aircraft could do all of it? That question would become the Joint Strike Fighter program. And the Joint Strike Fighter program would become either the greatest engineering achievement in aviation history or its most spectacular failure. For the first 15 years, it looked very much like the latter. The competition launched in 1996. 2 companies, 2 designs. 1 contract worth, conservatively, $200 billion. Lockheed Martin proposed the X-35, Boeing proposed the X-32. Both had to prove a concept so audacious it bordered on fantasy. A single airframe that could take off from a carrier, land vertically like a helicopter, and penetrate enemy airspace without appearing on radar, simultaneously, in the same aircraft. Boeing's X-32 looked strange, thick fuselage, a single massive intake beneath the cockpit. It flew, it worked. But Lockheed's X-35 did something Boeing's aircraft never did. It hovered. On June 20, 2001, test pilot Simon Hargreaves flew the X-35B, the short takeoff and vertical landing variant, to altitude, transitioned to supersonic flight, and then descended to a hover, all in a single sortie. No aircraft had ever done that before. No aircraft in history had been supersonic and then stopped in midair. Lockheed won the contract in October 2001. The F-35 Lightning II was born. And almost immediately, the problems began. The original timeline called for initial operational capability by 2010. The original cost estimate was $233 billion for the full program. Both of those numbers were, in retrospect, works of fiction. By 2003, engineers discovered the aircraft was overweight, not slightly. The F-35B, the Marine variant with vertical landing capability, was 3,000 pounds heavier than its weight limit. At that mass, it couldn't hover long enough to land safely, couldn't carry its full weapons load, couldn't meet its own specifications. The program entered what the Pentagon politely called a restructuring. 2 years of redesign, billions of additional dollars, a launch date that kept moving further away. And buried inside those redesigns was a flaw that almost nobody outside Lockheed knew about. a flaw that would take another decade to fully resolve. But before that story ends, understand what the engineers were attempting. The F-35A, the standard variant, 70 feet long, 29,300 pounds empty, a single Pratt & Whitney F-135 engine producing 43,000 pounds of thrust with afterburner, a maximum speed of Mach 1.6. Equipped with the AN/APG-81 radar, the most advanced airborne radar ever fitted to a production fighter. A helmet-mounted display system so sophisticated that the pilot can look through the floor of the aircraft and see the ground below. Internal weapons bays carrying precision munitions without the external pylons that defeat stealth. 3 variants: A for conventional takeoff, B for short takeoff and vertical landing, C for carrier operations with a strengthened airframe and larger wing. 3 aircraft, 1 development program, 1 unified supply chain. The dream was elegant. The reality was not. Exodus traces the complete evolution of the world's most powerful technology, every week from origin to the future. Subscribe now. The next chapter is always the one nobody predicted. By 2006, the Government Accountability Office was warning Congress that the F-35 program had poor cost and schedule performance. By 2010, the Deputy Secretary of Defense placed the program on probation. By 2011, the total program cost estimate had risen to $385 billion, a 64% increase from the original figure. The media had a field day. The jet that ate the Pentagon. The flying lemon. $1 trillion mistake. Every new cost overrun became a headline. Every technical problem became evidence that the entire concept was flawed. And there were real problems. Structural cracks in the bulkhead. Software that couldn't process sensor data fast enough. A fuel tank that could potentially explode if struck by lightning. Then came 2014, and the list got longer. On June 23, 2014, an F-135 engine suffered a catastrophic failure on the runway at Eglin Air Force Base, Florida. The culprit? A friction rub between the stator seal and the rotor measuring 0.6 millimeters. Less than the width of a human hair. Doubled. That gap generated enough heat to trigger a fire that consumed $100 million worth of aircraft in seconds. The world saw smoke rising from a Florida runway. The Pentagon saw something else. An engine so tightly engineered, tolerances so precise, that 0.6 millimeters was the difference between operational and catastrophic. No room for approximation. No margin for error. The F-135 was not a brutal machine. It was a precision instrument, operating at the absolute boundary of what material science could sustain. The grounding that followed affected the entire fleet. Critics called it proof the program was doomed. Engineers called it proof they were building something unlike anything that had existed before. Both were correct. That was the point. But here is the contrast that most headlines missed. The aircraft was being built to a standard no fighter had ever met. The F-15, the F-16, the F/A-18, developed before network-centric warfare, before the expectation that a fighter would simultaneously share targeting data with every aircraft, ship, and ground station in the battle space in real time. The F-35 wasn't just a new airframe, it was a flying computer that happened to carry missiles. And computers, unlike airframes, can be updated. Drop a comment below. Which era of the F-35's evolution surprised you most? The cost overruns, the engineering breakthroughs, or what happened on March 4, 2026? The turning point came in 2012. A new program manager, a new restructuring. Software development treated as continuous block delivery rather than fixed milestones. Block 2B in 2015. Block 3F, full combat capability, in 2018. Each block unlocking new weapons, new sensor fusion, new modes of operation. The F-35 wasn't a finished product being delivered. It was a platform being built in public, version by version. Flawed at launch, transformed by iteration. The Marine Corps declared initial operational capability in July 2015. The Air Force followed in August 2016. The Navy in February 2019. Each declaration careful, qualified, specific about which software block was operational. None announced the aircraft was finished. Because the F-35 is never finished. That's not a flaw, that's the design. 17 nations joined the program. The United Kingdom, Australia, Norway, Japan, South Korea, Netherlands, Italy, Canada, Israel. Each with their own variant requirements, industrial work-share agreements, political battles over cost. And then there was Israel. The Israeli Air Force received its first F-35I Adirs, Adir meaning mighty in Hebrew, in December 2016. 50 aircraft ordered. Modifications classified. Israel's variant is the most secretive of all F-35 configurations. Israeli-specific electronic warfare systems, integration with Israeli weapons, data link compatibility with Israeli ground and naval forces. What's not publicly known is most of what makes the Adir different from every other F-35 on the planet. On May 22, 2018, Israeli Air Force Commander Major General Amikam Norkin announced that the F-35 had flown its first operational missions over Lebanon, over Iran. Combat missions, real targets. First stealth aircraft of any kind to fly operationally in the Middle East. The aircraft that couldn't fly in the rain had just flown over Tehran. But it hadn't fired a shot, not yet. That would take 8 more years. If you've made it this far, you understand why this evolution matters. Subscribe to Exodus. This is where the future of air combat becomes visible before anyone else sees it coming. March 4th, 2026. Israeli F-35I Adir. Engagement over Iranian airspace. The target? A Yakovlev Yak-130, a Russian-designed light combat aircraft operated by Iranian forces. Not a peer competitor, not an advanced threat, but airborne in contested space, and an Israeli pilot made a decision. The Yak-130 was not alone. It was flying under the protective umbrella of an Iranian S-300 PMU-2 battery. Radar range exceeding 150 kilometers, designed specifically to detect and destroy low observable aircraft. On paper, the F-35 should have appeared as a detectable, trackable contact on Russian-made monitors. It didn't, because the Adir doesn't rely on passive stealth alone. Before the missile cleared the internal weapons bay, the Iranian radar network was already compromised. Not blinded, deceived. The S-300's operators were processing ghost signals, digital duplicates generated by the Adir's electronic warfare suite, presenting phantom aircraft 50 miles from the F-35's actual position. The operator saw aircraft that didn't exist. They didn't see the one that did. The bay doors opened, the weapon launched. The bay doors closed, under 1 second total. The Yak-130 was destroyed. The S-300 battery recorded no valid engagement solution. The F-35 Lightning II had its first air-to-air kill. 25 years after the first flight of the X-35. One weapon release, milliseconds of execution, and the most expensive fighter in history proved what its engineers had always argued. It was built to fight, not to impress a budget committee. The significance extends far beyond the Yak-130. This was operational confirmation of a principle the F-35 was designed around. That stealth, sensor fusion, and information dominance matter more than raw speed and maneuverability. The F-35 is not the fastest fighter ever built, not the most maneuverable. It cannot outturn an F-22 or outrun an Su-57. What it can do is know everything, see everything, deceive everything, and kill before the enemy knows it's there. F-35. Radar cross-section, roughly equivalent to a golf ball. Sensor fusion, integrating radar, infrared, electronic warfare, and passive detection into a single operator picture. Active electronic deception capable of fabricating a false air picture inside an adversary's command network. A node in a kill web spanning an entire theater of war. That is what flew over Tehran. That is what pulled the trigger on March 4th, 2026. Now consider what it means for every air force that doesn't have one. Russia's Su-57 Felon entered service in 2020. Low observable design, supercruise capability, internal weapons base, fewer than 30 aircraft delivered as of early 2026. Production constrained by sanctions and the defense industrial base stretched across 2 years of land warfare in Ukraine. The Su-57 exists. It flies. It has never fired a weapon in combat. China's J-20 Mighty Dragon is more serious. Operational since 2017. An estimated 200-plus aircraft in service by 2026. WS-15 engines replacing earlier Russian power plants. A genuine fifth-generation threat that has also never fired a weapon in combat. Never tested against an adversary with comparable sensor fusion, stealth, or electronic warfare architecture. The F-35 has. Once. And that single data point carries intelligence value no simulation can replicate. Every nation operating Russian or Chinese-supplied fighters now knows something it didn't before. The F-35 can find them. The S-300 cannot stop it. And the adversary may never see it coming. Inside that cockpit on March 4th, 2026, no public name, no press conference, no photograph released. But inside a $400,000 helmet, a pilot saw a targeting solution generated by sensor fusion across multiple spectrum bands simultaneously. Infrared, radar, passive electronic emissions. Collapsed into a single symbol on a visor. Target acquired. The pilot didn't search for the Yak-130. The aircraft found it. The human made the final decision. The machine had already done everything else. That shift, from pilot as sensor to pilot as decision maker, is the single most consequential change in aerial combat since radar in World War II. Confirmed by a single engagement over Tehran that lasted seconds and changed everything. Save this video. The story of how a $1 trillion gamble became the organizing principle of Western air power. This is the kind of documentary you come back to. Which brings the calculation back to the number everyone started with. $1.4 trillion. The F-35's cost per flight hour has fallen from $44,000 at peak operational introduction to approximately $25,000 in 2026. Still expensive, but measured against the loss of a carrier strike group or defeat in a total theater air campaign, that number becomes something different. Insurance is always expensive until you need it. The United States didn't just buy a fighter, it bought the immediate operational obsolescence of every radar system built in the 20th century, every S-300 battery, every air defense network built on the assumption that an aircraft emits a detectable signal. The F-35 didn't compete with those systems, it made them irrelevant. $1.4 trillion to render an entire generation of military technology obsolete before it could be used against the people who paid for it. Measured that way, the $1 trillion disaster starts to look like the most rational purchase in the history of modern warfare. Japan's F-35 fleet is expanding toward 147 aircraft, the largest order outside the United States. Australia operates 72. The United Kingdom deploys F-35Bs from HMS Queen Elizabeth. Poland has committed to 32. Finland accelerated its acquisition following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. 17 nations, one platform, the organizing principle of Western air power for the next 30 years. Block 4 upgrades add over 75 new capabilities to every airframe that receives them, including the GBU-53/B Stormbreaker, capable of engaging moving targets in all weather from over 40 miles away. Every aircraft that passes through a Block 4 depot emerges a fundamentally different weapon system. The F-35 of 2026 is not the F-35 of 2019. The F-35 of 2030 will not be the aircraft of today. A platform designed to age backward, more capable each year, not less. By 2035, over 2,400 F-35s across all Allied services, paired with collaborative combat aircraft, autonomous unmanned wingmen 2 to 5 per fighter, the pilot's span of control expanding from one cockpit to a multi-ship formation of thinking machines. By 2050, the F-35 will share its name with today's aircraft and very little else. Computing cores replaced multiple times over. Sensor fusion processing 60 data streams where today it processes 6. Cyber deception capabilities operating simultaneously across entire integrated air defense networks spanning thousands of kilometers. And the next generation air dominance aircraft, NGAD, in service alongside it, a 6th generation manned fighter. Autonomous wingmen, a battle space no human pilot could coordinate alone. What began in 1993 as a budget problem became the central nervous system of Western air power. The most expensive program in defense history. The most scrutinized aircraft ever built. The most politically embattled weapon system any democracy has ever chosen to fund. And now, quietly, definitively, the aircraft that pulled the trigger first. From a 0.6mm friction rub that consumed $100 million on a Florida runway, to a cyber-deceived S-300 that watched nothing happen over Tehran. From the X-35 hovering in a test hangar in 2001, to an air-to-air kill that rendered an entire generation of radar technology obsolete. From a $1 trillion disaster to a $1 trillion weapon. The critics were right about the cost. They were catastrophically wrong about what it bought. Hundreds of thousands of viewers watch Exodus every week. If this evolution resonated, subscribe. Next week on Exodus, the complete evolution of the B-21 Raider, the stealth bomber so classified that the Air Force refused to confirm its existence for 6 years. That's one you don't want to miss. This is Exodus, how everything transforms.